Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies episode 36. Tonight, we have a very awesome face-off against a Goosebumps episode exclusive story and a very famous and iconic Haunting Hour story. And we're going to be looking at some airplane horror with more monster blood versus Flight. I'm joined tonight, as always, with my two favorite people in the Goosebumps community. Uh, Ultimate Goosebumps Man and the Horrorlander. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good evening, passengers. This is Captain Horrorlander. You're going to be joining us on Goose Junkies Airlines. Our flight for today is expected to take about 1.5 hours. We do expect some turbulence coming up, and we have done the thorough security checks. There are no gremlins, goblins, grim reapers, or monster blood tucked in the cargo hold. We hope you guys enjoy the peanuts and the drinks, and always remember that you won't be able to kick us off this flight. This ain't United, bro. You're stuck with us the whole ride. Doing good, everybody. Excited. More Monster Blood is a fun one, and Flight is also a good one. So we got hit with two good ones, and we just got to see which one edges out the win.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting facing these two off because it's like a B movie versus a Twilight Zone episode. But how are you doing tonight, Ultimate Goosebumps Man?
Doing great as usual. Excited to base these two episodes off because again, they're very, as you mentioned, they're very different tones. One's more schlocky and cheesy. One has a much more emotional core to it, and is a very deep story. So it'll be interesting to see how those pair up.
Yeah, it's like comparing the ocean to a wading pool. But the wading pool is fun. That's why we're all here. We love Goosebumps. We love fun. We love kids' horror. So let's get into it. So I guess we'll start off with More Monster Blood. So More Monster Blood, right? This was the brainchild of the showrunners, obviously, when they were going to make the Monster Blood episodes. They had, I think, originally on their lap the first Monster Blood book and Monster Blood 2. And from what I gather, I have read, the making of the show book by Jose Prendez and what have you. I've listened to interviews. It's along the lines where they're like, yeah, we can't do this. But they wanted to do more with Monster Blood because Evan Ross was a reoccurring character. And I guess maybe Scholastic might have had some hand in that where they're like, hey, make two Evan Ross episodes. So they made this little fun two-parter, and they just literally took the first Monster Blood book and made it the first part. And then the second part, and I use this in quotations because it's mostly just a standalone. You don't need to watch part one to watch part two. But part two is a completely isolated adventure of Evan Ross with some resemblance of familiar characters that you will recognize in the books and some brand new characters that you only meet in this episode. And it's all literally contained into a plane, the whole episode. So this is one of those claustrophobic setting stories. And that's why we're here, because we're like, which one between Goosebumps and Haunting Hour does a airplane story the best? So whoever wants to take it, if you want to let me take this one, I can. We'll talk about More Monster Blood and get into the nitty gritty.
You could take this one.
Take this one? Okay, so Evan Ross, he's the main character of the Monster Blood franchise, at least back in the original 62 days, and he's been retired since Monster Blood 4. And I think most fans would probably say good riddance on that, but if you're a fan of Evan Ross and you've never watched the Goosebumps show, he has another story. It's, I guess, alternate universe, but it's in this episode, right? He's on a plane. You can kind of consider this like a Monster Blood 1.5 because I think the plane ride is mentioned like very briefly in Monster Blood 2. So treat this as kind of like that in between those two books. And he's on the plane, and the episode really just throws you into these four kids with, like, you have Evan. What's the kid with the glasses name? I can't remember his name.
Curtis.
Curtis. Mm-hmm. Then you have Conan, who is kind of like his book counterpart. He dresses up like the bully from The Simpsons. He has the same mannerism, even the same haircut. And then you have this girl named Julie. And they're all, I guess, plane friends. They're on this ride together. They're all like solo kid passengers, which was, I guess, a bigger thing back in the day. Nowadays, you don't really see that much because of, the world being different. But they're talking about this crazy story Evan keeps telling them about, like, as he's boasting to them about this Monster Blood fiasco that just transpired at his Aunt Catherine's. And they want proof that it exists. And Evan's like, no, why would I show you proof, man? This thing tried to eat a whole town. This thing means business. And even if I did have it, I wouldn't want this to get out because it's going to cause harm and cause damage. Well, sure enough, as we saw in the cliffhanger of part one, I guess this is the only cliff note thing you need to know from part one, is that there was some monster blood left over from Evan's inside of Evan's briefcase, and it's being stowed in the cargo hold below the plane. And we see Evan's dog Trigger is down there barking his full head off as the monster blood makes its way out. And as you can expect, it's trying to break free out of the cargo hold, out of any nook and cranny you can find on the plane. And almost very quickly, as soon as that begins, we start to see that that is the case. It's starting to make its way up. And some of the first victims we see is a guy, he's taking a crap in the bathroom. I guess he just took a massive dump, and he's trying to wash his face. And he's like, oh God, I got soap in my eyes. And he goes over to the sink to get more water, and it's monster blood, and he's rubbing his face in it. And I'm just like, at least he washed his hand first, man. Because that would have been really gross. But anyways, once we see that, we see a flight attendant hearing some noise, and he goes down to investigate. Of course, there's some monster blood there. Comes down and attacks him off screen, and then the monster blood starts to kind of seep down through some door cracks, and Evan notices it when he goes to use the bathroom, and he tries desperately to get the attention of flight attendants, saying, hey, there's this thing called monster blood. It's in the plane. We're unsafe. We have to land the plane. The flight attendant's like, stop making up stories. Just go sit back down in your seat. What you're feeling is turbulence. And he's like, no, monster blood's causing all this. And of course, he ropes in his friends and tries to tell them that's the case. And from there, chaos ensues. There's, of course, what you would expect out of this pretty cut and dry story. Monster blood gets out of these nooks and crannies. We maybe see an ant also eat a piece of it, which plays a role at the twist. And then people get sucked up one by one. And the kids have to find some sort of weakness to get themselves out of the equation. And luckily, this airline has some pretty bad food, because the monster blood's weakness is airline food. Yeah, airline food. Okay. Well, climax ensues. They use airline food to save everybody. And once they land the plane, we find out what's going to happen with some samples of the monster blood. And I guess we see some friendships have been formed that I guess will last a long time. And we see the twist with the ant, the iconic stinger ending with Evan screaming his full head off, and curtains fade to black. I'll pass it off to y'all, because I'm not the right person to ask about this episode, because I have some nostalgia goggles with it. But I did notice that y'all still liked it. So I'm curious to hear what y'all have to say before I have to say anything. This was an episode I did have on VHS as a kid due to a recording I had. So I did watch this one, not often, but I did have it to watch. So I don't know how many times y'all have seen the episode or not, but chime in what you have to say.
All right.
Go ahead. Okay. Well, I was going to say, this episode is honestly one of my favorite episodes of Goosebumps. It's just like, I would say it's top 20 for me personally. It is a very fun, very well-paced, very tense-filled episode. And it's the best Monster Blood story, without a shadow of a doubt. Not that that bar was set very high, but I think that's easily just the standout of the Monster Blood series. Because the plot, for once, doesn't involve Evan being an idiot. And the monster blood isn't brought in by Andy or Evan resurfacing it for who knows what reason besides them just plot convenience reasons. The monster blood has snuck onto the plane somehow, which I think is a very clever way of having the monster blood set into this. And I think that, as I mentioned, this episode is very tense. For being a kid's horror episode, it almost plays off like a slasher movie in a little bit of a way, where like people are being picked off one by the monster blood, and you just kind of have this like growing sense of dread as the people's numbers dwindle down, keep getting smaller and smaller, and these kids just have to band together to try and fight this evil. And I think that's a really fun idea. I think that the whole just being set on an airplane makes it very claustrophobic. And as one, again, it's a very scary concept because, like, if this monster blood gets to the pilots, you're going down. And if the odds of surviving a plane crash are slim to none. So if the monster blood gets to the pilot, you're basically dead. And so I feel like that just adds another sense of urgency to the story and that kind of sense of growing fear. I think the characters are all very fun. While the acting is not great for many of them, I think they still have a very fun dynamic with each other. They have very fun little personalities and banter that I think really works for the episode. I think that there's just a lot that's going for it. There's obviously some negatives with it. Monster blood effects look pretty terrible sometimes when it's the big CGI blob thing. That does not hold up. As I said, there's some acting issues with a lot of them, a lot of the key characters, and even some of the adult extras aren't the best actors in this episode. The flight attendant, who's like the first one to get picked off by the monster blood, has one of the like funniest fake screams I think you'll ever hear in a kid's horror episode when he first discovers the monster blood in like the storage container under the plane. That made me laugh way harder than I figured it would, just because of how hilariously awful that acting was in that sequence. And I just think that, again, it's just a very fun episode. It's very cheesy, very silly, but overall a very enjoyable time. And I think it's probably like a good 8 out of 10 episode for me personally, just because it's just, very enjoyable. So.
All right. Yeah, I have to echo that. I'm going to let Shiv take over before I say anything, but I thought it was funny that, what was his name? Colin? Is that his name?
That's
the kid with the glasses?
Oh, Curtis.
Curtis. I'm so sorry. That poor kid. They gave him a book, and it's like a how to I think it was like a how to build a modem for dummies or something, like what to do with my modem at home. He's just reading, like, why is he reading a book that's titled that? They're playing up his nerdy stereotype to the nth degree, and then Conan. I think Conan, as if we're gonna deem this guy the same Conan, he's probably the best version of the character. I mean, he has the Simpsons-isms and whatnot, and then Julie. I would take Julie over the girl from the books, Andy. I'll take her any day. And Julie is also a sweet girl. She makes a self-sacrifice moment. The kids do things in this episode that you just don't normally see. They're put into a situation that makes it compelling, and it's very perilous. So I definitely agree with your points that you brought up with that too. So back to you, BD. What's your thoughts on the episode?
I'd probably say it's one of the most overlooked episodes in Goosebumps because usually no one ever really talks about it. But I thought it was good. I'd give it a 8.2 out of 10. I think that it does a good job keeping the energy of the Monster Blood franchise, but this is my favorite story. It's the best one done. It's the most interesting. Probably one of my big things about it is, again, it's on an airplane, so stakes are very high because you basically have two options. You either get eaten by the Monster Blood, which is described as being shoved up a giant nose. Not exactly a good fate. Or you jump off the plane and just straight up die. You jump 20,000 feet to your death. So pretty high stakes, and it's all up to the kids. The characters are definitely the most entertaining to me. Curtis replacing Kermit. Kermit is such an annoying character. Curtis is your typical sort of geeky nerd guy. He's got some charm to him. I like the scene where he's basically listing off all the things he's allergic to, and it's like everything under the sun. And then he pours out those nasty turnips or whatever and eats them. I was like, all right, they're really leaning into this guy. Conan is entertaining. He is a bully, but he pretty much has good one-liners, like when he calls Evan Space Cadet because he's lost in his own world talking about Monster Blood. And Evan's pretty interesting. I like the fact that when Monster Blood is, rampaging around the plane, Evan, for once in his character's career, is actually smart because when the airplane pilot is saying, like, yeah, you see that? There was no Monster Blood, in the bathroom. He's like, well, that door was locked from the inside, so where'd the guy go? And right away the, flight attendant, like, shuts up, and she's like, okay, maybe this kid's smarter than I give him credit for. Maybe I'm the one who's being ignorant. And then she starts trying to investigate stuff. So overall, you got good characters. They feel like the type of kids you would see on like a school field trip. If you ever ridden on a bus, it's that type of dynamic. And Monster Blood itself has the highest threat level here out of pretty much anything. I mean, the only time you've seen stuff like this type of threat level is like from the first book when it was rampaging across the neighborhood. I love the fact that Monster Blood is sucking people under seats and eating them. It's ridiculous, but it's fun. You just see people getting picked off one by one, like a creature feature. It really is like creature feature action. The scariest scene is the cargo hold where that dude is investigating and he looks up and he sees Monster Blood basically fall on his face and eat him. Um, I love the scene, which is so over the top, of the airplane attendant basically keeping the cargo hold door down. It just keeps getting thumped and thumped and thumped. And then when they finally pull back the curtain, it's just her shoes and steaming monster blood kind of residue. That was pretty creative. And overall, the kids have a very good comeuppance during the climax because you got Curtis going through the cargo hold like a tunnel. So he has to prove his bravery and deal with dust because dust is a big thing to this kid. Not the giant monster eating up everybody on the plane. No, no, no. His dust allergies are what he's still worried about. And you have Julie basically doing the whole matador thing as if it's a raging bull, which is fun. Conan as his best character moment, he does something which is disgusting and horrific to think about, but he ends up being a hero. And at the end of the episode, everything kind of works out because Curtis and Conan kind of become friends. Julie and Evan kind of have like a little love interest, best friend thing going on. And then of course you get that nice twist ending. So I give it an 8.2 out of 10. It's good. It's fun. There are things to roll your eyes at, like some of the gags, some of the puns, the airplane food thing, which it was an eye roll, but to be fair, it's kind of playing off the whole Seinfeld, what's the deal with airplane food, that kind of thing. No one likes airplane food, not even Monster Blood. So there you go. And I think it's a fun time. So those are my thoughts.
I have to say, after hearing y'all give it like, 8 out of 10s, 8.2 out of 10, if you would have asked me before I rewatched this, I probably would have given like an 8.2 out of 10. But this time around watching it, like, I will say that this is an overlooked episode of the show. And I think it's probably because it's Monster Blood associated, and Monster Blood does not have a good rep. Most people who don't like the Monster Blood books probably won't go out of their way to watch the episodes, if I'm being honest, because they probably think, oh, they're more akin to they're more akin to the books. And then I've actually heard people say that they don't like more Monster Blood fundamentally because they wanted Monster Blood 2 to get made. So it's in a damning situation with the fandom, right? I feel, and it's kind of unfairly put into that. But judging it for what it is, this is the most cut and dry horror concept I've seen in Goosebumps. Period. I mean, it's hit the ground running. You understand immediately what's going on. They're stuck in the plane. The stakes are there. You either go down with the sinking ship or you keep it afloat. That's what you got to do. That's the mission. Evan Ross is probably his smartest he's ever been in the franchise. Books, episodes, what have you. He's put into a hero role. He's not thinking about himself or about how his peers think about him or trying to impress his friends or get back at bullies. No, he's trying to save people's lives. He's trying to warn them about Monster Blood, but nobody will listen to him. And that's commendable. That's actually a heroic moment. This this to me is what I think about when I think about Evan. Like I prefer to think about him in this way and not the book's way that depict him. Um, and I do think that they did a very fantastic job for the budget they had building this little plane set. I don't know if they filmed it in a plane or they built a set to look like it, but it looked believable to me. The cargo hold scenes were incredible. And even the scenes with Trigger barking his full head off, you can tell that has kind of like a Ridley Scott Alien vibe to it. When you see the dogs barking at the xenomorphs in those movies, it reminded me of that. Like I feel like they're taking inspiration from that. Um, and yeah, getting down to the action of the episode, um, the idea that people are actually getting like eaten alive is very crazy. And as a kid, I can tell you from experience that scared the crap out of me. you know, I'm a full grown man now. Obviously, a lot of the stuff's happening off screen. They did not have the budget to use whatever slime they were using. Obviously, there's some shots where you can clearly tell somebody's hand is maneuvering the monster blood to suck up stuff and eat stuff. Like the when he throws the Walkman down in the aisle, you see a guy's hand clearly poking out from the top of the slime. I thought that was funny. But they worked with what they could. And that scene in the bathroom always scared me as a kid because just the idea of like putting monster blood on your face that can eat you, that just petrified me. Because just imagine in your head what that would look like if you were able to kind of see what the monster blood was doing to the guy's face and how he would have gotten sucked up. That would have been petrifying if I had to guess. So yeah, it does have that going for it. Letting your mind fill in the blanks of how these people are getting sucked into this thing. But I think the problems in the episode really do come down to the jokes. I feel like there's a lot of stereotype humor played on the characters to kind of characterize them. And while it's charming and while it's B movie fare like Goosebumps can be at times, especially within this show, I kind of wish they explored more with the characters. And I saw it this time around. They had this like Breakfast Club aura to them, where like obviously they're representing different stereotypes. Like you got your John Bender, you got your popular girl, you got your nerdy guy, and you got your cool guy, Emilio Estevez. Obviously, they can bring different ideas to the table how to stop monster blood, right? They can explore that aspect more than just them hanging around talking about eating food that they're not allergic to, and a girl basically being a wallflower and Conan being Conan. Um, you know, I would have rather them be more active with their personalities with the story. Aside from that, my other big negative with it, obviously, is the effects look kind of dated, but I don't hold it too much against it because I've seen blob effects in movies that were made out of trash bags, and they did with what they could. So I get it. I get it. Not the greatest there. And then the airline food aspect does kind of throw me for a loop here because I get the joke, but why on God's green earth is that the mechanism that defeats monster blood and makes them crap out everybody? And everybody just so happens to come back as like they never had their clothes eaten or anything. They just come back au natural, like undissolved, nothing. So I guess that's the thing in Monster Blood. If you get eaten and spat up, you retain everything, and you don't have no evidence that you were eaten. I thought that was kind of goofy, but other than that, yeah, it's a fun episode. This is something that you can definitely tell that the creators wanted to put more humor in. You could definitely tell that they were going for a specific tone and vibe. And it's a throwback to B movies. It feels a lot like Roger Corman 80s cheese. If you ever want to explore his filmography, good lord, man. But or even some Charles Band stuff. But it had that vibe to it, and it has some pretty solid charm. I'd probably give it like a out of 10, about a 7.6, maybe a 7.8, but it's pushing an 8. I just kind of wish it had more to it. But like I said, solid stakes, solid peril. You felt it, and it worked. All you can
Yes,
ask.
probably instead of even the airplane food, what they could have just done is they kept flashing that bad special effect lightning. You could have just had a Night of Living Dummy 3 thing where one of them opens up the doors and you get that vacuum thing going on. And then as the monster blood gets pulled off, that timing, a lightning bolt comes down and vaporizes it. Could have just had that instead too. So
But if it got vaporized, I think it would have implied that everybody would be dead. so like
true,
you run the
true,
risk of like,
true,
well, how do you bring the people back?
true.
Well,
Maybe
I guess what they could have done is they could have had the airline food made the monster blood spit everybody up, and then they could have struck it with lightning.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or the monster blood gets like stuck in the door, and because of the vacuum, people aren't able to pull themselves out because they're like splitting apart. Could done that too.
Yeah, monster blood. I mean, honestly, for what it's doing in the episode, you can clearly see that it's kind of hunting people. I don't really feel like even in the books you got that vibe from it. Like it's like, oh, it just stumbles across people. No, this monster blood in this episode feels like it's hunting people, like waiting for it. Like the flight attendant when he comes down, he looks up. The thing was waiting to ambush him. That's gnarly. I like that. I wish Monster Blood was always like that. So yeah, I think we're all kind of similar on this. Like it's a fun episode. It's definitely overlooked. Um, and then kind of to juxtapose this episode to Hunting Hour, Flight, on the other hand, is not an overlooked episode. This is one of the few that everybody knows from the show. It's gotten a lot of high praise in the kids horror community. Some people, including myself, and I think even us, before we got on here, we're talking about how this episode goes toe to toe with the best of Twilight Zone. Yes, because this is a Twilight Zone feeling story, but it's really that good. It's really that good, y'all. If you haven't seen this, you need to go watch it to hear what we're about to say about it, because it is one of those things that you rarely see kids horror swinging for stuff like this. It's got some emotion, it's got some layers, it has some themes and subtext. While it's been done before, it's done very well here, very very well, and you're doing it on an airplane with a kid protagonist. So it's kids horror, and we're kids horror fans, so that just adds the cherry on top. So whoever wants to take this over, why don't we tell everybody what Flight is about and start off with the thoughts from there?
I could take this one.
All right.
So for Flight, basically it opens up with, of course, everybody's getting on this flight. It's like Flight 23 or something like that. Everybody's boarding, everyone's got their tickets, and you open up with the kid protagonist. He's going to be flying alone, and the reason why is because his family recently went through a divorce, and his dad and his girlfriend are basically inviting him to come over, and he's pretty cynical about that. He's obviously dealing with the divorce the way most kids do. As a child of divorce, I kind of know. So he's a little bit hesitant to go see his dad, doesn't have the best feelings about him. And as he finds his seat, he basically ends up sitting down and sees that the guy next to him is a little antsy. He seems to be on the edge. He's in a full business suit. And when he tries communicating to him, the guy is sort of continuously looking out the window, not really talking to him. And he's like, hey, kid, listen, I got this important business meeting. I don't really want to talk to you right now. So it's just sort of left as that little mutual thing. And one of the big things that happens on the flight is that a lot of the people are kind of whispering and talking about how there is a dead body on the flight. Somebody is having basically their casket in the cargo hold, which is, of course, ominous and creepy. And that's sort of brought up. And there is also a very creepy grandma who ends up getting on and approaching the main character and sort of having a sweet moment of just kind of admiring a kid, but she has the blackest eyes you'll ever see on a grandma. They just look straight up dead, and there's reason for that. So the kid kind of picks up an ominous vibe. So as the flight starts to take off, he starts getting nervous and has a few little ticks. He's a little bit on the edge. He's thinking about, him and meeting his dad. And then the guy next to him starts opening up and talking to him. They start conversating. That guy sort of starts acting like an uncle dad figure, kind of calming him down and speaking to him. And then the kid, as everyone starts falling asleep during this stormy flight, he looks over at the old lady and has a horrific hallucination. Or is it a hallucination where she's knitting and all of a sudden, she transforms into the Grim Reaper. And in a split second, she's back to that same old sweet grandma. So he thinks he's tripping out, but the guy next to him basically tells the kid, open up and tell me what you saw. And when he starts telling them, the guy right away starts doing the whole, you're a little on edge. Everybody's a little on edge with this flight and the whole creepy casket down below, kind of take it easy. But then when the kid eventually walks to the back of the plane, all of a sudden that guy is behind him. And he's a little shocked by that. How did the guy get behind him so quick? And now the guy who's sitting next to him is saying, no, she's staring at me too. Like, I got a bad feeling. And they both see her transform into the Grim Reaper. And there starts getting a sense of panic because they're two people who saw something that really is horrific and nobody else is going to believe them. So they have to figure out what they're going to do about it. And then as the story progresses, you start unfolding the big twist, which is that there's been some hints given with the flight attendants ignoring the guy, the fact that he's able to teleport basically around the plane with no explanation, that he's a ghost. He's in fact dead. And in fact, the body underneath the cargo hold of the plane, this apparition belongs to that. And the reason why he's on the plane is because he's in denial of death. He feels like he's been wronged in life. He feels like he's misfortunate. He had died in a truck accident, and he has nobody in his life. He's alone. He has no family, no friends that he can lean a shoulder on. And the kid sort of has to start talking up to this guy and convincing him that, hey, the Grim Reaper is for you, and you have to go negotiate with her because the Grim Reaper is not allowed to just force his soul out and take him to death. No, it has to be a mutual agreement. He has to agree with the fact consciously that he's dead and he's going to move on to the afterlife. And if he doesn't, you see that the plane starts malfunctioning. So the Grim Reaper has to put on some stakes because she's like, okay, this guy's not going to do it willingly, so I have to start tampering with others people's lives. And then you get this ultimatum. The guy has to accept that he's dead and he's going to move on to the afterlife, even though he really doesn't want to, or everybody on the plane is going to die, which is some of the highest stakes you'll ever get in kids' horror, because a middle school boy has to convince an apparition who's been wronged in life and misfortunate to accept his death, or he's going to feel guilty and responsible about not only him getting killed, but all these innocent people around him getting killed as well. So that is insane stakes, and the story takes from there. So I got to say, this is one of my favorite episodes from when I used to watch it weekly. I was nostalgic for Haunting Hour because I used to see it on the Hub when it came out weekly, and I remember liking this episode. I'd rewatched it a few years ago. It was in my top 5 or 6 favorite episodes. But now after rewatching it, I gotta say, I gotta give this thing a 10 out of 10. It's perfect to me. And after I finished it, I was almost teary-eyed because it is the best kids horror sympathetic ghost story out there. You know, wherever you can find a sympathetic ghost story in kids horror, this is, in my opinion, the best one because, as I mentioned, it's got fantastic stakes. You have a kid put in a position where he has to protect literally dozens and dozens and dozens of innocent people on this horrific possible plane crash. He has to work with the Grim Reaper, the Archangel of Death, this entity which is trying to get this soul into, the afterlife. He has to convince this guy who has nobody to rely upon. And the reason why I love this episode is the dynamic between the boy and this guy who's sitting next to him, because they're both learning from each other. Because even though the boy is trying to understand the guy and trying to make him realize, like, hey, you feel like you've been a nobody your whole life. You feel like you've never been good for anything. You have no wife, no kids, nobody to rely upon. If you own up to this, if you do what you're supposed to do, you're going to be like the hero. You're going to save all these innocent people in this desperate situation. So you get your moment of glory. And I'm here for you. This kid who he otherwise would have never met in his life, it becomes sort of like a companionship thing. And the kid, he's underestimating the fact that he has somebody in his life, his dad and his mom, because this guy is lonely all the time. He has nobody. The kid is being ungrateful and selfish in his situation because of the trauma that he's dealt with. But the guy's like, hey, he's indirectly telling him that you have a dad who loves you, who's inviting you over to meet him. It's not like he's denying you anything. And your mother's there for you, and you got people who love you. So they sort of learn from each other. And the Grim Reaper, man, I love the Grim Reaper's depiction in this episode. First of all, I love that the Grim Reaper takes the form of an old lady, because the idea of the Grim Reaper needing to take the most nonchalant, unsuspecting form would be a sweet old lady and having to get on the plane. It also parallels with death being timeless, and you got this age-old woman, so the age thing sort of plays between that. And I like the fact that the Grim Reaper is powerful. The Grim Reaper is responsible for the plane malfunctioning and other stuff going on. But at the same time, there's this contract between the role that the Grim Reaper is assigned. And in order to work around that contract, the boy hints that fate comes in. So, in fact, the guy who's dead and the kid met together because of what the Grim Reaper did. The Grim Reaper was kind of like a puppet master, pulling the strings, making sure that, all right, the only way I can convince this guy to basically come to the afterlife is by getting this perfect kid in the role. So that's great. And it is creepy, the Grim Reaper flashes. I wish they would have done a little bit more with it, but it is creepy for what it is. I like the dead body effects on the guy when it cuts to him slowly realizing he's dead, the whole hand through the hand thing, and he starts decaying. And there's a very end part of the episode where, let's say, things kind of resolve. It's very emotional, very heartfelt. And the kid is leaving. And he basically, as he's leaving to go see his dad, he looks at the grandma, who's the Grim Reaper, and says, "See you later." And the grandma goes, "Oh, for sure, we will." And I was like, that's good, because of course she's death. So yeah, I give it a 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5, whatever you want to give it. I love this episode. It's perfect in my opinion. And it really stands out because it's not only creepy, not only high stakes, but it's emotional. It's bittersweet. It's really well done. And it's extremely deep for kids horror, which is about as deep as a kiddie pool. So this is where you start getting into the, 10-foot zone, maybe pond level zone. This is really deep for kids horror and felt like something you would have seen on Twilight Zone. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think you summed it up very poignantly on that, man. It's one of these stories. The closest thing, and I kind of wish we faced this off against this Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, because I think this would have been a clearer, or I guess more fun face off. We should have done Shiny Red Bicycle from Are You Afraid of the Dark versus this, because they both are one of these type of stories that are tear jerkers. You get what the story is saying, but they both do completely different things with it. Of course, we could probably talk about Shiny Red Bicycle at a later point, but in like that story, it's about a guy who's lost his best friend. He's going through grief and he's struggling to live in his day to day life, knowing that he doesn't have his best friend around, but he's visited by his friend's ghost, who literally comes back to help save his brother because, he's been so in his own state of mind. He's kind of put off, his relationship with his brother, and that helps them connect and it helps save his brother. That's a very powerful story for what that's doing, and it's a sympathetic ghost story. It's memorable. A lot of people say that Shiny Red Bicycle is the best Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. Same thing applies with Flight. I've seen many people say that Flight's the best episode, or at least top three. And Flight is one of those stories that legitimizes Haunting Hour. This is one of those things that, like, Haunting Hour, it has its fair share of variety. It's essentially Are You Afraid of the Dark done right, right? it's a more serious, for the most part, take on that show. But you have, your creature feature stuff. You have your, existential stuff. You have your sympathetic ghost stories like this. You just have your wild, crazy, fun stories. Your creative, very I don't know how to put it, like stuff like The Cast, like where you're like, who thinks of this? But you have stuff like that all in the mix. But this comes the closest to Twilight Zone I've seen done in kids horror. I've never seen anything capture Rod Serling than this episode. It perfectly captures what Rod Serling would have done if somebody told him to make this concept. Like, they nailed it to a T. It does remind me of two of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies as well, Devil and The Sixth Sense. It's kind of like if you took aspects from both of those stories, with like the kid seeing dead people, and then Devil is about a group of people stuck in an elevator, and the devil's an old lady, in disguise. That's kind of like if you took both of those ideas and put it into one. Just you put the kid from Sixth Sense into the elevator. That's what this is. They're stuck on a plane. The Grim Reaper has such a threatening aura because she is absolutely willing to kill everybody on the plane just to take one person to the afterlife. That shows you that death is merciless. That shows that death does not care about your well-being, because it's going to meet everybody at one point. It doesn't care when you go. But it can decide when you do. So the guy, he needs to go to save everyone, and that is the moral dilemma here. There's an actual moral dilemma from the Spectre. He has to make a decision to save people's lives, and it's harrowing. It's a very harrowing story, and the fact that they had a kid be the vehicle for this person to see that was incredible. The acting was so good in this. The old lady, I mean, good God, she is creepy. I don't know who was in charge of casting this woman, but they did a phenomenal job. I'm imagining they had headshots, and they're like, okay, imagine her in the dark. Would she be creepy? Yeah, we're gonna go with this lady, whoever she is. Good job, because there's something about her, the way she looks at you, like it kind of felt like that quiet librarian that would stare in the back of your brain when you're in the library, making sure that you're not talking or ripping pages out of books. It was kind of like that, she's looking at you, but you're afraid to look back. You can feel that fear in the kid. It's hard to capture that. I don't know if you guys felt that in the past, but that's how I felt watching it. And there's something about it too. Like, you have this like, I don't know how to put it. Like, you have this foreboding nature that something is off. And especially, I guess, when you first watch, you're like, okay, what's going on with this passenger sitting next to him? Why is the flight attendant ignoring him? You're asking all these questions, and then once you start getting the answers, you're like, oh crap, it's that deep. It's just there's this foreboding nature, this absolute need to solve it that really just makes you feel all the stakes possible with it, and the emotions that you get from the guy, making his sacrifice is palpable. And I think that, if you believe in the afterlife, if you're a spiritual person, we're all going to have this decision at one point. And it makes you think, like, are you going to be that person that holds on to resentment you had in your life, or are you going to be willing to move on? It makes you think about stuff that you wouldn't think you would think about. And that's why it's relevant. That's why it lingers with me. It makes me care. And that's hard to do. And I give it a lot of props for that. I'd give it a 4.9 out of 5 stars, though, because of this one little thing that gets on my nerves about it. And that's I love the constant decaying of the guy's face over time as the episode goes along. But in the editing, they constantly go back and forth between him decaying and going back to his physical face, going back to decaying. I'm just like, okay, why are we doing this? Like, just keep him decaying, man. Like, what? It's just something like I'll be watching a scene. I'm like, wait, what? Wasn't his face just decayed like 2 seconds ago? It's just one of those little editing things that Haunting Hour is known for. I don't know. If I was going to be forgiving on it, it's an easy 5 out of 5. But it happened too many times for me to like be nice about it. So, other than that, fantastic episode. Fantastic. And I'm sure Micah is also going to agree on this. I have a feeling.
Oh, yeah. Definitely 100% agree on it. This is a 10 out of 10 episode for me. This is my first time watching it as well, so I don't really have those childhood memories with it. But this episode it shocked me with how deep it is. Like, I was not expecting a kids' horror episode to cover the topic of death in such an introspective and just very emotional and deep way that really makes you think. Like, as people, we all have to face death someday. Whether we like it or not, we have to face it. And I think the way this episode handles that is really well done, of this person who just feels like he didn't have a life. He feels like his life was taken from him too early. He feels like he just, he wasn't able to make something of his life before he was taken. And he feels wronged about that. And I feel like that's something that I think that preys on a common fear we all have is, dying before we really get a chance to really live a life. And I think that's a very, again, especially obviously towards adults, especially, that's just a very prominent fear and mindset. I think we all we kind of have at one point or another, because, you never know when death is going to strike. And it's just one of those things that just, again, it just makes you think of like, what am I going to do with my life while I have it, instead of trying to just figure out what am I going to do in the future. It almost makes you want to embrace your life as you have it right now and make the most of what you have and appreciate it while you have it. And I think that this is a really nice little emotional core message there that maybe isn't blatantly there, but there's that subtext in there with the guy and the kid and their dynamic, and kind of teaching the guy has to learn to move on and the kid has to learn to enjoy his life while he has it and appreciate what he has. And I think that's just a very emotional and really well-written idea for a kids' horror episode. And it's something that I feel like a lot of things will go by like some kids' heads when watching it. I don't think they'll really understand the full concept of it, but it just works very well. And for the kids who would understand it, it's a really great life lesson. And I just think the horror aesthetics are really good here. The plane atmosphere is very creepy, and the tension rising as the episode goes on, as more things go wrong and the plane starts to crash and all this other stuff. And it's just, again, it's this constant building tension and fear as the guy who's refusing to move on, as you said, if he doesn't go on, everybody else dies around him. And it's almost, again, has this moral, it gives him this moral dilemma of like, what would you, and it makes you think, again, what would you do in that scenario if you were, if you found out you were dead and you didn't want to move on? Like, what would that mindset be like? And I feel like it just puts you into that perspective of that character so well. And I think, again, as I mentioned, the dynamic between the man and the kid, really great. The acting is top notch. And honestly, I would say some of the best acting in Haunting Hour. And there's some pretty good acting throughout some of the episodes. But this is like really stand out. The Grim Reaper is very creepy throughout the episode and just builds up. Again, it's this nice ominous background presence for the first half of the episode when you don't really know what's going on. You know the Grim Reaper's here. You know there's the dead body in the cargo. So you're just wondering, like, okay, which person is dead? Like, there's got to be some dead person on the plane. Is it the kid? Is it the guy next to him? And just kind of leaves these questions throughout that first half of the episode. And then when all the answers come in the second half and then just kind of continues to go on from there, it's just a flawlessly executed, in my opinion. And I just think that the ending especially is very bittersweet. I'm a Christian. I'm just going to say that. So I believe in heaven and hell and all that. So I think just the emotional resonance of the bright light, obviously you can kind of assume is either the afterlife or heaven, however you want to interpret that. And I just think that the way that kind of is handled and the idea of just like almost like death treating the man with a little bit of kindness once he accepts his fate. And once he's just kind of, and she almost feels sympathetic for him in a way you can kind of tell. And how she just kind of smiling and just happily leads him off into the distance and just has him go peacefully once he reveals what is going on. I think that's just very resonant to me as just for my religious beliefs and all that. And then on top of that, just the final little stinger ending, I think is another great kind of ominous yet bittersweet way to end it with the boy talking to death, the Grim Reaper. And she just tells him, we'll meet again sometime. And that almost like freeze framing on the kid's face, who looks almost like content, but also concerned at the same time. It makes you kind of raise questions on what he was feeling at the time. It leaves this kind of ambiguous, again, it could be even ominous tone, but it could be a more hopeful tone. It can kind of be open to interpretation. And I just think it's very well done. There's some moments in there that I actually had me kind of tearing up a bit, which is something that doesn't happen very often. So I think this episode just handled this whole thing so well. And it's just one of the most resonant to me personally.
I also think the whole episode's biggest strength are like the two adult characters, because like the kid is a vehicle to kind of make the story work well, but like the guy who's the passenger, he's got the best performance. Like his acting was off the chain, and even when the kid is convincing him like you're gonna cause all these people to die, and he's like, I'm dead, I got nothing. Your guys dying doesn't concern me. He's basically saying like, F you all, I'm not going to the afterlife. Like that was intense, because then the kid's like, this guy is, in a way, even though he's dead, he's like suicidal in a sense. He's like, oh, I don't care about your guys' lives or whatever. And I like the fact that you brought up the Grim Reaper is kind of doing like a tough love thing, because even when that kid turns around and he looks like very, sympathetic towards the Grim Reaper, and he's like, can't you do anything? Like, can't you just come in and fix it? And the woman is quiet like the whole episode. And the one time she opens up is her knitting, and she's like, doesn't work that way, kid. And she's basically telling him like, it's on you. Like, don't look to me for help. I'm just the one who's going to be causing this plane to crash, and you got lightning bolts blowing up engines and all this crazy stuff. And the kid's like, okay, F that. I'm the one who's got to do it. So it's good, man. And there's also a parallel with the passenger guy, because he tells the kid that he didn't go for like family and friends because he doesn't like to be tied down. And it's ironic because death is tying him down. Like he talks about him being free. He's not free, because his willingness to not die and accept his death is tying him down and making him miserable. So it was almost like that last bit of like, you have to cross this and then you get true freedom, which is insane that we're talking about that in a kid's horror media, which we literally talked about more Monster Blood. We went from more Monster Blood, most goofy thing, to like talking about this existential deep stuff.
Yeah.
What I like,
I also
oh, I was gonna just add to that real quick. I said what I like the most about the male passenger who's dead is that he was holding on, saying that I never got to live life. I was alone and all that, but he's clinging on to a life that really wasn't a life, you know. And I feel like what really should sink in more for his character is that he came to the realization like I didn't have a life, so I need a second shot at it. And the kid said literally tells him like you have a second shot, man. Save us, go to the afterlife. You can move on and you can find happiness elsewhere. You don't know what's coming, but you can make the best of it. That is the main takeaway I took from it. You know, as somebody who's very spiritual, like I said, brings me back to the thing I said earlier is like it makes you think about like in the afterlife or when you're given that your proponent to go there. Are you going to choose to stick around and linger and sulk over a life, or are you gonna go there? And for the guy, he's like, he's sitting there telling the kid, I never got to live, blah blah blah, and then he gets like face palmed. He's like, oh, you're right, kid. I thank you for talking some sense in me. That was perfect, absolutely perfect, because that's what you should understand. That's what I was getting at with Rod Serling. Rod Serling, he did this stuff all the time at Twilight Zone. I mean, there's countless episodes where he's talking about like the meaning of life or spirituality, stuff like that. I mean, there's many episodes that kind of talk about that and being alone, learning to live. I mean, there's countless episodes like the one where he's stuck in a town by himself, and you kind of see a similar message where he's stuck by himself and he's like, well, this isn't a life worth living. I don't have anybody to share it with. It's kind of like the same message here that this ghost guy has to learn, but it's more inverted on that. Like, well, I didn't share it with anybody, so I didn't have much of a life when I was around. And I was really reminded of that. And I think if Rod Serling, or if this episode was like dedicated to his memory, and maybe he ever watched it or saw it somehow wherever he is, he would smile. He would be like, "Yeah, that was a fitting tribute." Like if you put this in the modern Twilight Zone, or you want to make a modern Twilight series and just rechristen this as a Twilight Zone episode, I don't think people would even know the difference. That's how good it is.
It also has hints towards like the two Twilight episodes that come to mind, which is the Hitchhiker and also For All the Angels, because For All the
Yeah.
Angels had death come down and the guy basically has to negotiate with death. And I'll pass it on to Micah to give his closing thought. But I also thought it was interesting that, in a way, even though the kid's also helping the guy, at the end of the day, this whole situation was really for the kid because the guy told the kid, he's like, you're still a kid. Like, you have plenty of time to change and do everything you want to. I'm dead. So after this, I'm pretty much done. And if you think about it, the guy who died in, let's say, the truck accident, Death knows about that, right? So Death, in a kind of way, kind of set that up. So it almost makes you think that even though Death hinted that they utilized the idea of fate to get the kid to the guy so he'd be able to move on, really it's almost symbiotic because she might have been using this guy to kind of improve the kid and make the kid a better person at the same time. So yeah, it's pretty incredible in that regard. In that you think that he's just helping the guy, but actually the real one who's getting the help is this kid who has his whole life ahead of him. So there you go.
Yeah, and also I think that like one of the other big resonant things about the passenger who's dead is like when he's like introspecting on himself, he's like saying, I had everything. I had the sports cars, I had a great job, I had money, I had all this other stuff, but you would think would leave a fulfilling life, but at the end I was alone. I had nobody. And like it kind of just is another really great message there of like, the world, like the society nowadays tells you if you have all the riches, all this, popular, expensive stuff you have, you will live a good life, and that's just not true. Like, if you have, you can have all the stuff you want, but if you don't have those connections, you don't have people, you don't have relationships and people who care about you and love you and just can support you in these times, you really aren't living a fulfilling life. If you didn't make anything of your life, if you just live by the wayside, just walking through life, just getting into the riches of life and all that stuff, but you never actually, you took everything else for granted. I think it's just a good message there of like, again, as it's mentioned, like we talking to the kid, the message of just, don't take life for granted, and just, you can have all the material stuff you want, but that's not going to matter in the end. And what matters is the life you lived and the relationships you formed. I just think that's, again, this is so moving, and especially a message I think that today people need to hear more than ever with how materialistic society has become.
That's the whole irony of it too, because like you brought up, he has all these cars and all these things. He didn't make an impact on a single person, but then he loses his body, he loses everything, and this is the one time that he made an impact on a bunch of people. So he lost everything and got the biggest return.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah. I mean, this, like I said, y'all out there watching. I mean, this episode brings it out. It's deep. It's deep. Which brings us to, I guess, the victor here. I don't think it's, I don't even think we need to deliberate all too much. I think Flight easily beats more Monster Blood in this scenario. Um, and I know we're comparing airplane horror, but even then, like, if you want to be like, oh, well, Monster Blood has more, monster things, I feel more of a threat there. Sure. But Flight is a fantastic story. This is one of those situations where, it offers what you would expect and then some. And also, the Grim Reaper is a threatening villain. Come on now. She's willing to sink a plane for one soul in exchange for 30. That's hardcore. And the kid, he understands that pretty clear. So, I think we all get hands down give it to Haunting Hour on this, and Haunting Hour takes the W over Goosebumps. I don't know the running tally. I think we stopped keeping track a while ago. But yeah, this is one of those clear instances where Haunting Hour just wipes the floor with Goosebumps. And it's probably not going to be the last time. But we'll get there when we get there. So to like close out, because we finished our comparison here between the two of those, airplane horror is kind of like a genre in itself. There's plenty of stuff out there. There's an iconic Twilight Zone episode, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. There's a few feature films involving airplanes and monsters aboard a plane, or maybe a villain aboard a plane, or a hijacker aboard a plane. You get films like Turbulence, Red Eye, Snakes on a Plane, Shadow in the Cloud, you name it. There's so many airplane movies out there. I'm just going to throw it out there. What's your favorite airplane movie or story, period? If it's not, that's outside of Flight, obviously.
Yeah, I think airplane horror still gets kind of a little bit niche because I feel like there hasn't been like that much stuff out there. I know Snakes on a Plane is like the most popular, but to me that's always been like so bad it's good. In terms of actual stories, I've always liked the original from the TV show Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Never read the short story, but I do want to read it. Although the monster effects look really outdated, of course, it looks a guy in a goofy costume being that gremlin. The whole idea of this guy on a flight seeing a gremlin on the wing, and the fact that he knows nobody's going to believe him, but there's a problem because there's a clear threat that's on this airplane. And I remember the episode ending off with, I think he gets taken away to like a mental hospital because people still thought he was crazy even though he got help. So the guy got tormented that whole episode. It was creepy. And because I watched that one, I remember I was still pretty young when I saw that one, and I was on flights afterward. I always, if I'm by the window seat, I always look at the airplane wing, and that one always pops up in my mind because, it's not gonna happen. But you're like, what if something was on the wing? What would you do if you're that one person who sees it? And there was a story which never got made, but I remember Stephen King used to promote it. So I guess I wish this airplane horror story happened where he wanted to do something called like The Rats Were Loose on flights like six something. He promoted it on the Conan talk show, Conan O'Brien. He talked about how it was going to be a bunch of people on this flight, and as they open up the luggage, little tunnel areas, all these killer rats were going to come out and start ripping out people's tongues and killing everybody. And then I think he never went through with it. And then Snakes on a Plane basically kind of ripped off the idea later, except they used snakes instead of rats. So that was pretty interesting. I would have liked that because he has a story called Graveyard Shift with killer rats, and this would have been basically Graveyard Shift on a plane. So those are my picks.
All right. Micah, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Honestly, no. I don't really think I've seen any kind of like airplane movies or airplane horror outside of these two episodes, really. I don't even think I've seen Nightmare in 20,000 Feet, so I'll have to check that one out for sure. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it.
I will say there's a ton of airplane thriller movies. There's even airplane comedy movies with Leslie Nielsen. But airplane horror is, you know, like BD said, it's kind of niche, and there's not that much out there, so you'd have to stretch into thriller territory to get a bigger scope. But I will say one of my favorite airplane stories of all time is actually a real life story. It's actually an unsolved mystery segment. It's based on the real life segment or the real life story of DB Cooper. If you've never seen Without a Paddle or heard of the DB Cooper legend, it's basically about this a guy who strapped a bomb to himself. I think in like the 60s or 70s, and boarded 747, and told the flight attendant he has a bomb and he has these demands that he wants some cash. So he tells the flight attendant to tell the pilot that he needs to land the plane at this specific airport or the nearest airport or whatever. And from there, he's going to make a call to get brand new money printed, hand delivered to him, and then they're going to go back up in the air and they're going to go to a different place. And once he gets his money, his brand new minted money, and he goes back up in the air, he then tells the pilot to open the hatch, and he free falls out of the air, a 747 with a parachute, and disappears into the Washington National Forest. And nobody's ever found his body. Only a handful of his money has ever turned up, and the mystery is still like one of the biggest unsolved mysteries ever. People have spent, I would say at this point, hundreds of thousands of hours trying to find, collectively, speaking, not realistically, but like between, human to human um, contribution, right? I would say about 100,000 hours plus collectively on this case, and there's something so disturbing about it because you don't know what the guy was going to do with the money, why he wanted uncirculated bills, and the fact that nobody ever found his body. Obviously, he probably died, or he went back on to his merry life and just never used the money. Which it just begs the question, like, you know, who is this person? Why did they do it? And it's one of those things that's constantly fascinated me. I can't tell you how many times I've just casually looked up DB Cooper, case studies, theories, and stuff on YouTube. It's so fascinating. It's like one of those cases. There's very few of them that captivate me in that way, but it's just one of those cases that I can constantly watch content of and just get immersed into. But I would recommend you to do that. That's my favorite airplane story of all time, and it's a real story. So sometimes, and if you actually want to get like the flight attendant's perspective, there's plenty of like interviews with her and all of that. She looks petrified in every single review, every single interview that she's had, because she was legitimately afraid of this guy. So he sounded like he was not the most chipper guy to deal with. And honestly, if I was on a plane being hijacked and I knew about it, I would just be like, I'm already like preparing myself for the worst. I'm like, all right, I'm take me. Yeah, I'm gone. I don't need to meet any demands. If you're gonna blow me up, just do it. I've already accepted my fate, and I don't like flying. It's one of those things. It's not like my big fear of deep ocean, but it is one of those things. Like, I know I'm stuck there, so if I'm screwed, I'm screwed. Right. So I think that's why airplane horror, I think there should be more of, because people understand that, and I wish filmmaking would give credit to that. Outside of that, I recently watched that movie Shadow in the Cloud, which is essentially Nightmare on 20,000 Feet, but set in World War II. That was kind of fun. Um, you know, but other than that, I haven't seen much that has impressed me. Outside of that, I did like the John Lithgow version in the Twilight Zone movie of Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. That might be my favorite version. I like the Gremlin look way better than the classic show. That one was good. Um, but yeah, that's all I have. All right. So, anything else we want to add on before we get off?
Don't think so. No.
All right, we got this one. Oh, well, rather short episode, everyone. But hey, we talked about 2 episodes and airplane horror. There's not a lot to talk about, so we appreciate that you guys stayed on as long as you did. If you watched from beginning to end, we always love it if you do that. If you want to support us, there's free ways to do so. You can like this video, you can share it. You can check out our other Goose Junkies podcasts. We have 36 episodes in a playlist on here for you guys to check out at your own leisure. And we literally talk about everything kids horror. So if you're tired of just hearing about Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark, we change it up all the time. It just depends on our mood, depending on the week. Yeah, this week we had just so happened to talk about Goosebumps again. But next week we also will be talking about more Goosebumps. So that's probably mainly why you're here anyway. If you want to go support Micah, I will put his channel in the comment section and in the description of the video as well as the Horrorlanders info as well. They're great guys. Please go show them some love. They come out and do this podcast with me each and every time we do so, and they're really fun guys to talk to, and they have great content on their channels. If you're not watching them, you're really missing out on some good stuff, y'all. For our next episode, for episode 37, I did hint at the guys before that I wanted to do these two because it's my turn to pick. So I decided to do facing off against clone-themed episodes, but the consternation with the clones is that they're perfect people. So obviously, one could infer that we're going to be looking at Perfect School, and we're going to be facing Perfect School off against the Perfect Brother, which is going to be interesting. It might be a little close, I feel, but I think I already know where it's going to go. But we'll get there when we get there. Thank you all again for watching us. Until next time, we hope you take care. And let us know down in the comment section if you have any suggestions or recommendations, or you actually want us to do some stuff. We are open to suggestions. We're always writing down stuff to do in these podcasts. Feel free to contribute in ways that that help the podcast if you think it will do so. So until next time, take care, everyone. Have a good night.